I've driven across most of the United States, but there's a stretch of road in the central Appalachians that I'll never touch again, no matter how desperate I am. It was supposed to be a simple route, a scenic detour through the mountains to break up a long solo drive from Knoxville to D.C. But when the sun dipped below the ridges and I found myself low on gas, I made the mistake of stopping in a town that shouldn't have been on the map. The locals stared too long, the roads didn't line up right, and the air itself felt like it was hiding something. I left that town alive, but I left something else behind, and I've never felt normal since. Back in 2021, I was working freelance logistics, mostly driving high-value shipments in a plain white cargo van. It paid well, and as someone who didn't mind long hours in isolation, I actually liked the gig. I always planned my own routes, and I'd often go out of my way to explore places I'd never been. It gave me a sense of freedom. That particular trip had me moving computer equipment up the Eastern Corridor. Nothing hazardous, no deadlines. Just me, my GPS, and a thermos of bad coffee. That day, I left Knoxville around 11 a.m. with the goal of reaching Roanoke by nightfall. Google Maps showed a winding mountain route that cut through some back highways. I figured I'd take the scenic way. It shaved off an hour and looked empty enough to avoid traffic. I was wrong. Somewhere between Jefferson National Forest and Monongahela, I hit a dead zone. No cell service, no data, and hardly any signs of civilization. I wasn't panicked at first, but when my gas tank dipped below a quarter and I hadn't seen a proper gas station for over an hour, I started scanning every fork in the road a little more carefully. Just before dusk, I spotted an old hand-painted sign nailed to a wooden post. Gas, food, lodging, Briar Glen, 2 miles. The letters were fading, and the arrow pointed down a narrow gravel road that curved into the trees like a snake. I hesitated. The place wasn't on my GPS, and the sun was setting fast. But I needed gas more than I needed logic, so I turned off. Briar Glen wasn't what I expected. The road narrowed to a single lane, and the trees pressed in so close that it felt like I was driving through a tunnel. About a mile in, the gravel gave way to cracked asphalt. Then the buildings started, wooden structures, squat and leaning, with tin roofs and windows darkened by heavy curtains or plastic sheeting. No neon lights, no signs of commerce. Just one rusty gas pump beside a shack with a crooked porch. I pulled up cautiously and stepped out. The air smelled like mildew and something sour, like spoiled meat left in the sun. A bell above the door jingled as I entered the shack, and an old man behind a counter looked up without a word. His eyes were watery and pale blue, but the rest of his face seemed frozen. He didn't greet me, just stared. Pump still work? I asked. He nodded once, then pointed to a yellow button near the register. Prepay, he said flatly. I gave him 40 in cash and went back outside. As I pumped the gas, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. There were no other cars. Not on the road, not parked, not even broken down on blocks. Just silence. I tried to shake it off. Small towns could be weird. Maybe everyone stayed inside after dark. Still, the silence felt too deep, like a held breath. Once I topped off the tank, I debated whether to turn around or keep pushing through. My gut told me to leave, but I figured I'd at least grab a snack or hit the bathroom. Behind the gas station, I spotted what looked like a diner, Minnie's Cafe, painted in faded cursive above the door. The lights were on inside, and there were silhouettes in the windows. Against my better judgment, I walked over. The second I stepped in, I knew something was off. The people inside, maybe 10 of them, all seated at booths, turned their heads in perfect unison. Their faces were ordinary enough, mostly older, a few kids, but their expressions were blank. Not surprised, not annoyed, just watching. Take a seat anywhere, Han. A woman's voice called from behind the counter. She was the only one moving, wiping down a tray with exaggerated slowness. Her smile looked rehearsed. I sat at the counter. She poured me a coffee without asking and slid over a laminated menu. I barely glanced at it. The coffee was lukewarm and tasted like it had been reheated 3 times. I didn't dare touch the food. So you just passing through? She asked, still smiling. Yeah, I said. Just needed gas. Heading east. She nodded, but something in her eyes flickered. Folks around here don't like traveling after dark. Roads get funny. Funny how? She didn't answer. just wiped the same spot on the counter over and over. That's when I noticed something else. There was no sound. No clinking silverware, no kitchen noise, no quiet conversation. Just the buzz of a flickering light and the dull hum of a ceiling fan. The other patrons were still watching me. None of them had moved. I finished the coffee and stood up. Thanks, but I should probably get going. The woman's smile dropped for half a second, just a twitch, like a glitch in her face. Be careful out there, she said. Don't miss the turn. What turn? Again, she didn't answer. I left fast. The town looked different now. The streets seemed narrower, and the buildings leaned in toward the road, as if they'd shifted slightly while I was inside. The pump station was dark now. No light in the shack. No old man. Just my van, still warm and ticking from the drive. I climbed in and locked the doors. I followed the only road out, but about 10 minutes later, I realized I was circling back into the town. I know it doesn't make sense. I didn't turn around. I followed the road exactly. But somehow, the same hand-painted Briar Glen sign appeared again on the left, and the gas shack came into view. Only this time, the lights were back on, and the old man was outside, standing under the lamp with his hands at his sides like he'd been waiting. I hit the brakes hard. Then something moved, just beyond the trailing. A person. No, a shape. Slender, tall, standing completely still. Watching. Then another. On the other side. And another, crouched low near the ditch. I couldn't see faces, just outlines. Too many of them. I hit the gas and took the first right I saw. It wasn't on the GPS. It wasn't on any map. But I followed it anyway, swerving onto the shoulder to avoid more of those shapes as they emerged from the woods. My headlights flickered. The radio snapped on with static, then cut out completely. I drove blind for a full mile, just praying the road didn't dead end. Then finally a break. A metal gate, half open, with a dusty U.S. Forest Service sign hanging crooked on the fence. I didn't think. I just floored it through. The road after the gate was rough, potholed gravel, but at least it wasn't looping back. After what felt like an hour, I burst out onto a highway. I didn't stop until I reached a lit gas station near Covington. I parked under the lights and just sat there shaking. The next morning, I tried to retrace the route on my laptop. There's no Briar Glen anywhere in that region. No Minnie's Cafe. Nothing. I even pulled up old maps, local directories, Reddit threads. The closest hit I got was a ghost town. Burned down in the 80s after a suspected arson, no survivors. It had the same general location. But even that didn't line up with what I saw. The place I stopped at felt active, not abandoned, not charred ruins. It felt alive and watching. For weeks after that night, I had the same recurring dream. I'm back at the counter. The woman is smiling. The people are watching. And just before I wake up, she leans close and whispers, "You came back." I've switched jobs since. I don't do solo drives anymore. I don't take back roads. I don't trust detours, no matter how short they seem. And when people ask me why I avoid the Appalachians, I just say one thing. Don't stop after dark. Not out there. Not if the town doesn't show up on your map. Because some places don't want visitors. They want return customers. Before we proceed, please let us know where you're from. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel and be a part of our small community. Let's continue. They told me no one lived up there anymore, just empty ridgelines and old mining ruins buried beneath vines and rust. But on my third night camping alone in the Appalachians, I saw a man standing on the ridge above me, watching without moving. At first, I figured it was a hunter, maybe a ranger, but he never called out. He never moved. And when I climbed up to confront him the next morning, I found no footprints. Just a burnt patch of earth where the trees had died in a perfect circle. Last fall, I took a solo backpacking trip through a stretch of the Appalachian Mountains near the Tennessee-North Carolina border. I'd been dealing with a lot, burnout from work, a breakup that left me hollow, and that creeping feeling that life was moving without me. I needed a reset. So I packed light, mapped out a week-long trail loop through some of the lesser-traveled paths, and left my car at a ranger-monitored drop point. No cell service, no distractions, just woods, air, and time. The ranger at the station was polite but distant. When I asked about the trails further west, specifically a stretch marked Mill Ridge, he just shook his head. "No one really goes up that way anymore," he said. "Old strip mine up there. Empty hills. Nothing to see." I asked if it was dangerous. "Not exactly," he said, pausing before adding. "Just quiet." I shrugged it off. Quiet was the whole point. The first 2 days were perfect. Chilly mornings, golden leaves underfoot, distant ridgelines rising like frozen waves. I hiked slow, took my time with meals, journaled at night by firelight. The forest was so still it felt like I'd stepped out of time. Occasionally I'd hear a hawk or the rustle of deer, but nothing else. No other hikers. No planes overhead. Nothing man-made. That was until the third night. I'd set up camp near the edge of a clearing just below Mill Ridge. The air was cooler there, and the wind carried a strange scent, like ash or burnt wood, though I saw no signs of a recent fire. After dinner, I sat near the edge of the clearing with a small fire, just watching the sky turn violet behind the trees. That's when I noticed something on the ridge above me. A man, standing completely still. At first, I thought it was a tree stump or rock formation, but when I shifted position slightly, the silhouette shifted too. I could see the outline of shoulders, a head, long legs, just standing there, facing me. The fire cracked behind me, and I turned to look. When I looked back up, the figure was gone. I told myself it was a trick of the light. A hunter, maybe, but no one should have been that far off trail, and no one would just stand there silently at dusk watching someone else's camp. That night I barely slept. I kept my headlamp within reach, waking every hour to scan the woods with a nervous beam of light. But I saw nothing. No movement. No sound beyond the wind scraping the trees. By morning, my nerves had settled enough to make me curious. I decided to hike up to the ridge and see if I could find signs, boot prints, a blind, anything. The climb wasn't easy. The slope was loose with shale and roots, and the canopy above filtered the light into a constant dull gray. When I reached the ridge, the temperature dropped noticeably. Not like typical elevation shift. This was sudden, sharp. I zipped up my jacket and looked around. No footprints. No tire marks. No path. Just a strange patch of ground where the grass had browned in a near-perfect circle, maybe 10 feet wide. At the center was a stump, blackened, as if it had been struck by lightning, though the bark around it wasn't charred. I squatted and touched the earth. It was cold, damp, but there was no burn smell, no ash. Just nothing. Then I noticed something carved into the trunk of a tree nearby. 3 slashes, vertical, crude, and deep. Not initials. Not a trail marker. Just slashes. I took a picture with my phone out of habit, even though I had no service. Then I turned back toward my camp. That's when I saw another figure. Far off, down in the trees. Standing near my tent. Facing up toward me. I froze. My chest tightened like I'd been punched in the ribs. Whoever it was hadn't moved, but I could tell. They were looking straight at me. Not walking. Not waving. Just standing. I took the descent fast, slipping once and cutting my palm on a rock. When I got back to the camp, the figure was gone. No signs. But something was off. My tent's zipper was half open, and my sleeping bag was dragged a foot outside, like someone had yanked it then stopped. Nothing was missing. Nothing damaged. But I knew someone had been there. I packed up. Fast. I wasn't about to spend another night in that spot. I hiked for hours, pushing past the next waypoint just to put distance between me and whatever I saw. The trail looped through thick forest, and by mid-afternoon the sky had clouded over, turning everything dim. That's when I heard the first branch snap behind me. I spun but saw nothing. A squirrel, maybe. I kept going. Then another snap. Closer. I picked up pace. Then a sound like breathing. Not animal. Human. Raspy and low, just behind the tree line to my left. I didn't stop to look. I ran. I don't even remember deciding to run. I just did. Full pack on my back, lungs burning, branches slapping my arms and face. I made it to a clearing where the trees broke just enough to let light back in. I stopped there, chest heaving, and looked around. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Until I turned back toward the tree line I'd come from, and saw him. A man, tall and pale, standing half in shadow, half in light. His clothes didn't look modern. They were threadbare, maybe canvas or wool, dirty and old. His face was blank, not angry, not curious. Just blank. And his eyes, too wide, too white, locked onto mine with a focus that made my knees shake. He raised one arm. Not to wave. Just slowly, like he was pointing toward me, or beyond me. I backed away. Tripped. Scrambled back up, and kept moving. I didn't look back again until I hit the next ridge, and crossed a stream that marked a known exit trail. No one followed me. I reported it when I got back, went straight to the ranger station, muddy, scraped up, and borderline manic. The same ranger was there. I told him everything. He just listened quietly, then said, "You went up near Mill Ridge?" "Yeah." He sighed and rubbed his temple. "People used to live up there. Old miners, back when that land was still being gutted for coal. Company pulled out in the 60s. There was a fire a few years later. Took out what was left of the cabins. Locals always said the hills were empty now. But," he trailed off. "But what?" He hesitated. "You're not the first to come back rattled. Most folks don't go that way. We stopped maintaining the trails up there for a reason. I left that day and haven't been back since. Sometimes I still look at the photo I took, the one of the 3 carved slashes in the tree. I tried uploading it later, but every time I do, the file corrupts. The image grays out, like the tree was never there. I don't know what I saw that night, or why it felt like something was trying to pull me back into those hills. But I've learned to listen to local warnings. When they say the hills are empty, they don't mean no one's there. They mean whatever's there ain't supposed to be." Most people don't realize the Appalachian Trail is maintained almost entirely by volunteers. People like me, who hike into the woods with hand tools to clear brush, fix signs, and keep the paths safe. We leave behind handwritten logbooks and old trail shelters, just to track when someone was last through, note if a bridge is out, or flag wildlife sightings. They're usually boring, until last fall, when I found a log tucked behind a false panel in an old lean-to. It wasn't meant to be read, and it didn't sound like someone just reporting trail damage. It sounded like a confession. I've been a trail volunteer for the Appalachian Trail Conservancy for about 6 years now. My section's tucked away in a quieter stretch through West Virginia, near the border where the hills roll low and the forest feels heavier. It's not glamorous work, hauling tools, cleaning trash, and fixing signs that locals use for target practice, but I've always felt proud of it, like I'm part of something bigger than myself, a living ribbon stretching from Georgia to Maine. Each shelter along the trail has a weatherproof box with a logbook, usually spiral-bound or cheap composition-style notebooks. Hikers use them to jot down their thoughts, warnings, sightings. We volunteers check them during maintenance rounds, mainly to get a feel for traffic or issues. Over time, you start to recognize the regulars by their trail names: Copper Dog, Blue Jean, Hiccup. But in October 2023, while checking on a remote lean-to near Weevil Knob, I found something that didn't fit the usual pattern. Something that shouldn't have been there at all. The Weevil Knob shelter is old, log-framed, moss-covered, and sunk a little into the hillside from years of erosion. I'd been there dozens of times, and it was always the same. Quiet, a little eerie in the mornings, but harmless. The trail log in its usual spot was sparse, just a few entries from the past 2 weeks. But when I went to patch a broken floorboard near the back wall, I heard something shift under the wood. Curious, I pried up the panel and found a thin, yellow notebook shoved between joists, stained, brittle, and wrapped in an old Ziploc bag that had gone cloudy with age. I figured it was trash at first, or maybe someone's old journal forgotten during a storm. But when I opened it, I saw that the entries were dated, every one of them, and they weren't written by a single person. Different handwriting, different pens. The first date was from 2016. The last was 3 weeks ago. I sat on the shelter's edge and read for almost an hour. The entries weren't typical hiker ramblings. They were short, clipped, and unsettling. Many didn't sign names. Saw him again, standing where the trail splits. Didn't wave. Don't think he has a pack. If you find this, don't camp at the saddle north of marker 62. Things walk at night there, not people. Third night without sleep. I moved off trail, but he still found me. Tired, scared, screaming in the ravine. Thought it was a fox. Not a fox. What chilled me most was that some entries were crossed out, like someone had tried to erase them. Or maybe someone didn't want the next reader to see what was written. One page near the back had been torn clean out, leaving only a jagged spine. I remember sitting there with the woods silent around me, and feeling a weight I hadn't felt in years. Like something had been watching me the whole time. I put the notebook in my pack. I didn't want to leave it there, but I wasn't sure what I'd do with it either. I didn't sleep that night. I camped about 2 miles down from the shelter, in a spot with good visibility on all sides. Still, I kept waking up, feeling like something had brushed the tent wall, like someone circling. Back home, I scanned the pages and ran a quick search through trail forums and hiker subreddits. Nothing. No mention of a secret log at Weevil Knob. No talk of missing pages or off-the-books journals. But one thing kept nagging me. Several entries referenced the same spot. Saddle north of Marker 62. I pulled my paper maps. There was a saddle north of Marker 62, an old clearing where the trail narrows and rises sharply for about a quarter mile. I'd been through there once, maybe 2 years ago. Didn't remember anything odd, but now it felt like unfinished business. So I went back, alone. I told the ATC I was doing an extended maintenance loop. Drove out early, packed heavy, extra water, bear spray, even a sat phone my brother had loaned me. I got to the saddle late in the afternoon. The wind was strong there, cutting sideways through the gap. I didn't see anything strange at first. No campsites, no new markers, just an old rotted post half swallowed by moss. But when I circled the ridge and stepped off the trail to inspect a nearby ravine, I found something. A tarp, half buried in leaves. Weathered. Underneath it, bones. Not human. I think. Maybe a deer? The skull was smashed, like it had been hit hard. Not chewed. Not torn. Crushed. Nearby, I found another tarp, this one blue and newer, and under it, a torn pack with faded patches. Inside was a journal. No name. Just this one line, written over and over on the last page. He comes when you sleep. Then I heard it. A voice. Low. Male. You're not supposed to be here. I whipped around. Nothing. No footsteps. No one on the trail. Just wind. I left. Fast. I didn't stop until I hit my car. And even then, I felt like something had followed me the whole way down. I turned over everything, the pack, the tarp, the journal, to a contact at the ATC who'd worked search and rescue before. He said they'd look into it, but I haven't heard a word since. I checked last week. Nothing in any public missing hiker logs about someone vanishing in that stretch. No record of a report, no news. But the worst part? When I went back to scan the notebook I found in the lean-to, the pages were blank. Every single one. The ink was gone. Not faded, gone. I know what I saw. I know what I read. I still have the scans I made the night I got home. But the physical copy, the one I touched with my own hands, is just a stack of yellow pages now. Sometimes I think about what that first line said. Saw him again. Standing where the trail splits. And every time I go out to maintain that same stretch of trail, I feel it, the weight of someone behind the trees. Just far enough not to be seen. Just close enough to feel. I don't think the volunteers are supposed to know what's really out there. We're just meant to fix the signs, sweep the shelters, and move on. But someone knew. They wrote it down. And for a while we were warned. Now, it's quiet again. Too quiet. Most folks don't even realize there are abandoned ranger outposts in the Appalachians. Places that were once staffed, stocked, and connected, but now sit empty and forgotten. There's one in particular, Outpost 42, tucked deep into the mountains near the Tennessee-Virginia border, that hasn't reported in since 1998. Officially, it was closed after a wildfire, but off the record, rangers avoid the area completely. Last year, I was sent in as part of a mapping project for old service routes, and I made the mistake of hiking up to that outpost alone. I found the building still standing. I also found the last log entry in perfect handwriting. Still here. Still watching. Don't tell them I'm gone. I work for the U.S. Forest Service, not the exciting wildfire jumping kind, but the back-end logistics division. Trail assessments, structure reports, GIS mapping, stuff like that. I'm not a thrill seeker. My job's mostly long hikes, long notes, and longer spreadsheets when I get back. Last October, we were tasked with auditing old ranger facilities in the Appalachian corridor. seeing which outposts still existed on the ground and updating our internal maps. Most of these were easy enough, either collapsed into rotted logs or converted into hiker shelters. But then there was Outpost 42. No photos, no trails listed. Just a blip on an old 1986 service map and a short footnote. Operational until spring '98. No further contact. The wildfire story checked out with old burn records, but no GPS pin existed. That was the kind of anomaly that gets kicked down to guys like me. So I planned a 3-day solo hike with a pack, compass, and printed topo maps, and headed straight into that stretch of the forest where no cell towers reached. The trailhead started normal, marked, worn, and full of squirrel chatter and autumn leaves crunching underfoot. But the deeper I went, the more the forest seemed off. Not in an obvious way. No strange smells, no weird animal sounds. Just stillness. Too much stillness. The kind where you stop and realize the birds haven't chirped in a while, and your own footsteps feel like you're breaking some rule by being there. About 8 miles in, the old service path forked. One way led toward a known tower. The other was completely unmarked. I took the second path, cross-referencing the hand-drawn route from the '86 survey. Every step into the unmarked trail felt heavier. Thicker underbrush. Colder air. Even the light felt grayer somehow, like the sun couldn't quite reach this part of the hills. Around late afternoon, I reached the ridge. Nestled in a shallow clearing surrounded by bare poplar trees was the outpost, weathered but still intact. A wooden cabin, maybe 20 by 30 feet, with a collapsed antenna beside it and a small porch caved in on one corner. The door hung slightly ajar, creaking gently in the breeze. I announced myself like protocol requires. Forest Service. Anyone here? Nothing. Just wind. I stepped inside. It was like time stopped in 1998. Dust on every surface. A calendar on the wall frozen in April. A wood stove cold but clean. A cot made, boots placed neatly underneath. On the desk sat a leather-bound logbook and an old radio. Everything smelled of rot and dust, but there was no sign of vandalism, no animal intrusion. That alone was strange. This deep into the mountains, cabins don't survive untouched for over 2 decades. I opened the logbook. Most entries were normal, boring daily check-ins, weather updates, fire risk warnings. Then came the final 5. April 13th, 1998. Saw lights above Treeline again. Not aircraft. Silent. Hovered for 30 seconds. April 14th. Trail camera batteries drained. Prints outside cabin too large to be bare. April 15th. No sleep. Something breathing outside window. Never saw it. April 16th. Can't transmit. Power works but radio dead. Scratches on inside of door. Inside. April 17th. Still here. Still watching. Don't tell them I'm gone. I read that last line at least 10 times. Then I noticed something worse. The handwriting on that final entry. It wasn't the same as the others. It was cleaner. Smoother. Too perfect. Like someone trying very hard to mimic the ranger's previous notes. My hand went cold holding the page. Then I heard movement upstairs. Just one soft step. There shouldn't have been an upstairs. I looked around again. No stairs, no loft. Just a flat cabin ceiling. But I swear on everything, someone or something had taken a step directly above me. I backed out slowly, trying not to make a sound. My boots felt impossibly loud against the old wood floor. The door creaked again, and the wind picked up sharp, whistling through the gaps in the siding like a warning. I hit the ground outside and made it 30 feet into the tree line before I realized I left the logbook behind. Every instinct told me to keep going, but I couldn't. That book needed to be brought in. If this was some kind of hoax, fine, but if not, it was the only record of what happened. I returned to the porch. Just as my boot hit the first step, the cabin door slammed shut. Hard. I froze. Waited. No movement. I stepped up, slowly reached for the handle, and pushed the door open. The inside was different. Furniture moved. Cot unmade. Boots gone. And on the wall, scratched deep into the wood above the calendar, were 4 words. You weren't invited back. I didn't take the logbook. I didn't take anything. I just ran. I made camp a full 5 miles away that night, lighting a fire even though I usually avoid it. Every sound sent my heart racing. Every breeze felt like footsteps. When I got back and filed my report, I was vague. I marked the structure as intact but unsafe. Structural decay, evidence of animal activity. I didn't mention the log, or the scratching, or the sound above the ceiling. A week later, someone from a higher office emailed me. Outpost 42 was officially dismantled in 1999. No structure should exist at that location. Please verify coordinates. I did. I even went back to double check. Same spot, same ridge. But there was nothing. No cabin, no porch, no antenna. Just overgrowth and a few splintered boards buried in the brush like they'd been rotting for decades. I know what I saw. I stayed in that building. I read that book. And every now and then, usually around 3 a.m., I wake up certain that someone's outside my house, just beyond the treeline watching. The last thing I did before closing that case was print one of the pages I'd photographed from the logbook, the one with the final entry. I have it framed, locked in a drawer, but I can still picture it perfectly. Still here. Still watching. Don't tell them I'm gone. Whoever wrote that, I don't think they ever left. You ever do something so stupid, you can feel the regret crawling up your spine before you even finish doing it? That was us, me and two buddies, standing at the rusted gate of an abandoned coal mine in the middle of the Appalachian backwoods, bolt cutters in hand, grinning like idiots. We thought we were just chasing a thrill, poking around in some old forgotten shaft. But what we found down there wasn't forgotten. It wasn't abandoned. It was waiting, and it wanted us to stay. I grew up in a nowhere town wedged between two ridges in southern West Virginia. Name's Kyle. If you've never been out that way, it's all hollers and hardwoods, rusting trailers and old-timers who don't wave when you drive by. You make your own fun out here. And for me, Danny, and Luke, that meant hiking, camping, and sometimes breaking into places we weren't supposed to be. We weren't vandals or anything, just bored 20-somethings who hadn't gotten the memo that high school was over and there wasn't much else coming. Danny had heard about this coal mine from his uncle, who worked it back in the 80s before it shut down. Supposedly, the company pulled out after a cave-in killed 3 men, and nobody ever went back in to recover the bodies. Regulations were looser back then, and rumors said it was cheaper to close the site and pay hush money to the families than fix the structural problems. We didn't care about the history, we just wanted to see if we could find old gear, or maybe shoot some creepy footage for TikTok. It took us half a day to get to the place. The road turned to gravel, then to dirt, and finally to nothing at all. We hiked the last mile through thick brush, following a barely there deer trail that Danny swore led to the site. And it did. The entrance was just how you'd expect. Black hole in the side of a hill, covered by a rusting steel gate, padlocked but sagging. A crooked and no trespassing, hazard area sign hung on one hinge. Luke clipped the padlock with bolt cutters we'd picked up at Tractor Supply. I remember the snap of the lock echoing through the trees. Something about that sound made my stomach twist a little. It was too loud, too final. We flicked on our headlamps and stepped into the mouth of the mine. At first, it was just cool, damp air and crumbling timbers. Our boots crunched on gravel and old wooden slats. We passed rusted carts, shattered glass oil lanterns, and graffiti that looked decades old. The deeper we went, the more the air changed, still damp, but heavy now, like breathing through wet cotton. About 200 feet in, we found a side shaft, narrower, older looking. Danny wanted to explore it, but Luke hesitated. "This ain't just abandoned," Luke said, eyeing the way the beams bent inward slightly. "This looks condemned." "Exactly," Danny grinned. "Where else are you going to find the good stuff?" We went in anyway. The passage narrowed. We had to crouch. Our lamps flickered now and then, probably from moisture, we told ourselves. Then we started seeing things. First, it was carvings on the walls. Not names or graffiti, symbols. Circles, intersecting lines, some kind of tally marks. Old and shallow, but deliberate. Then came the sounds. Faint at first, like rocks shifting or wood groaning. But then sharper, rhythmic, like someone tapping. Slowly, deliberately. We froze. All 3 of us heard it. We turned off our lights. Dead silence. Then, tap, 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 further down the tunnel. None of us spoke. We just looked at each other, eyes wide in the dark. Then Danny, like a moron, whispered, probably water dripping. We turned the lights back on, That's when we saw the footprints. Boot prints in the dust. Fresh ones, leading toward us. But there hadn't been any behind us when we came in. That's when Luke panicked. "We need to go," Danny argued. I didn't. I just started backing up. Luke followed. Danny hesitated, then cursed and came with us. We reached the main shaft again and breathed like we'd come up for air. But the air wasn't right. It smelled burnt. That's when we saw the second gate. It hadn't been there before. I swear on my life. A heavy steel lattice door, about 30 feet back, cutting off the tunnel behind us. Welded to the rock. It looked new. Shiny. Wrong. We ran. The mine didn't feel abandoned anymore. It felt alive. As we stumbled toward the exit, every sound echoed like it was chasing us. Every shadow moved wrong. I glanced back once and saw a figure, human-sized, standing behind the gate, not moving, just watching. We didn't stop running. The entrance was gone. We reached where it should have been, but all we saw was rock. Solid, seamless. No gate. No sign we'd ever cut it open. Just cold, jagged stone like the hillside had swallowed the opening. Luke started screaming, punching the wall. Danny dropped to his knees and started praying. I was too stunned to move. We turned in circles, headlamps sweeping wild arcs across the mine. That's when the lights started dying. One by one. Not flickering, dying. Danny's went first. Then mine. Only Luke's remained. A dim, wavering beam. He turned toward us, panic on his face, and something moved behind him. I screamed, but it was too late. A hand, black and thin, with too many joints, wrapped around Luke's head and yanked him backward into the dark. He didn't even scream, just vanished. Me and Danny ran. Deeper. No choice. We found another shaft. Wooden ladder. Rotted, but better than standing still. We climbed down into blackness. Below was a chamber. Wide. Hollow. No light. Just a distant red glow, like coals. Still burning. Danny whispered, "What the hell is this?" We stepped closer and saw them. Bodies. Dozens. Stacked. Preserved somehow. Faces shriveled but intact. All with the same expression, mouths open, eyes wide. Then something moved behind them. A sound like wind, but inside the rock. I couldn't look anymore. I grabbed Danny's arm. "We go. Now." We turned to climb, but the ladder was gone. Not broken. Just gone. Like it had never been there. I don't know how long we wandered in that place. Time didn't work right down there. Sometimes the glow vanished, and we were in total blackness. Sometimes it came back stronger, like the mine was breathing. Danny stopped talking after the first day. I think he was trying to listen. Like he thought the mine would tell him how to get out. He just sat, staring at the walls. I left him there. I kept moving. Crawling. Scraping. Trying to feel air movement, anything. At some point, I woke up outside, flat on my back in the woods. It was daylight. Birds chirping. The mine was gone. Nothing but a slope of shale and moss where the entrance had been. I walked 10 miles to the nearest road. A trucker picked me up. Took me to the ER. They said I was missing for 6 days. Danny and Luke were never found. I don't talk about it to anyone, not even my girlfriend. But sometimes, when it's real quiet at night, I hear it again. Tap, tap, tap. And once, I swear, I saw that hand, reaching out from under my bed, just for a second. I haven't gone near a mountain since. I won't. Not ever again. Something's still down there, and it remembers me. My uncle always said the cabin wasn't haunted, it just had rules. He never smiled when he said it. He wasn't the kind of guy who joked about anything, especially not that place. I stayed there once, alone, after he passed. Thought I was too old to believe in his backwoods superstitions. I broke one of the rules on the first night, and by the second, I knew something was watching me. My uncle, Henry, was a strange man, strict, quiet, old school. A Vietnam vet who came back and never really rejoined the world. Lived alone for the last 20 years in a cabin way out in the Appalachian foothills of North Carolina. No electricity, no cell signal, barely a dirt path leading in. Every now and then he'd show up in town for supplies, beans, bullets, tobacco, and vanish again for months. People said he was paranoid, maybe even crazy, but he always treated me decent. After my mom died, he took care of me for a while, taught me how to shoot, how to fish, how to stay quiet in the woods. But even as a kid, I knew his cabin was different. He had these written rules taped to the wall by the front door. 11 of them, scribbled in all caps with a black Sharpie. My cousins and I thought it was just his way of scaring us straight. No wandering at night, no whistling indoors, always leave an offering on Sundays. That sort of thing. I'd stayed there with him a few times as a teenager, and the place always felt heavy, like the trees pressed in too close, like the shadows came quicker than they should. But I never questioned the rules when he was alive. Not until I came back years later, after they found him dead on the porch, sitting upright in his old rocking chair. Eyes wide open. Not a mark on him. The family didn't want the land. Too remote, too eerie. They were going to sell it for timber rights, but I asked if I could have it instead. I'd just gotten laid off and needed a break from the city. Figured I'd stay a week or two, clear my head, maybe fix the place up a little. When I got there, it looked just how I remembered. Gray wood, tin roof, front porch with a creaking swing, and the same damn rules still taped to the wall inside. Faded now, crinkled with age. I read them again for the first time in years. Lock the door before sundown. Don't open it again until sunrise. Cover all mirrors after dark. Never leave food on the porch. Always leave a glass of water on the windowsill. Do not sleep in the loft. Burn sage in the fireplace every third night. If you hear someone calling your name outside, ignore it. Don't whistle. Never touch the well. If you break a rule, apologize out loud before midnight. It read more like a threat than a checklist. The first night was calm. I followed the rules, even if I didn't believe in them. Something about being alone in that place made you cautious, made you remember every rustle in the trees. I locked the door at dusk, pulled a pillowcase over the old mirror in the bedroom, left a dusty glass of water on the sill. Felt silly but safe. The second night, I forgot to burn the sage. I didn't mean to. I was tired. Had spent most of the day chopping wood and repairing one of the shutters. By the time night rolled in, I was half asleep on the couch with a blanket over my legs and an empty beer bottle in my hand. I woke up around 2 a.m. to a sound that didn't belong. Thud. From the loft. I sat up fast. The cabin doesn't have insulation. Every footstep echoes like a drum. I hadn't gone up there since arriving. The ladder was still up. Nobody should have been up there. Thud scrape, like something dragging across the floorboards above. I stood, heart racing, and grabbed the old hunting rifle from the corner. Clicked off the safety, crept toward the ladder. But halfway there, I remembered the rules. Do not sleep in the loft. If you break a rule, apologize out loud before midnight. I hadn't burned the sage. I'd broken the rule. And I hadn't said a damn word to the house. I stood there, paralyzed, staring up into the black square of the loft opening. The sound stopped. Silence again. Then something whispered my name. Not loud, not angry, just a breath. Kyle, from inside the walls. I backed up until my knees hit the couch. Sat down hard, rifle across my lap. The cabin was dead silent now, but something felt wrong, like the air itself had turned heavy. My eyes flicked to the windows. Every pane showed darkness, but the trees outside looked off. Too still, like they were waiting. Then I noticed the glass of water on the windowsill. It was gone. Not knocked over. Not spilled. Gone. The wood underneath it was dry. No ring. Like it had never been there. That's when the door handle started to jiggle. Slowly. Back and forth. Like someone outside was trying to be polite. I aimed the rifle at the door, breathing hard. I knew I'd locked it. I checked it every night. It jiggled again, more urgent now. Then the whisper came again. Closer. Kyle, open the door. Please. It sounded like my uncle. But my uncle was dead. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then a shadow passed across the curtains. Something tall. Slender. But with joints that didn't move right. Like a puppet half-controlled. It paused at the window, pressing against the glass. No face. Just a shape. Watching. I shut my eyes. And whispered, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I broke the rule. I whispered it again. And again. And again. Like a prayer. When I opened my eyes, the figure was gone. So was the sound. But the mirror in the bedroom, the one I'd covered, the cloth was on the floor. And something had written on the glass, in perfect block letters. Too late. Didn't sleep. I sat in the chair until the first pale light of dawn touched the trees. Then I grabbed what little I'd brought and left. Didn't lock the cabin. Didn't say goodbye. I tried telling myself it was sleep deprivation, stress, maybe trauma from losing Uncle Henry. But I know what I heard, what I saw, that thing behind the window, the voice. A week later, I got a call from my cousin. He'd gone up to check on the place. Said it was mostly the same, except all the rules were gone. The list, the paper, everything. Except for one word, scratched deep into the front door with something sharp. Stay. I never went back. Sold the land to a logging company for pennies. Let them deal with whatever's in those woods. But sometimes, when I'm lying awake in my apartment, I hear it again. The soft jingle of a doorknob turning. And I never keep mirrors uncovered at night. Not anymore. It was supposed to be a simple weekend backpacking trip. Me, my girlfriend Leah, and our two friends, Devin and Marcus, had planned it for months. We were all in our late 20s, worked boring office jobs, and craved some fresh air and isolation. Leah found this loop trail in a lesser-known part of the Appalachian Range in southwest Virginia, promising good elevation and fewer crowds. That sounded perfect to us. Rustic, remote, no cell service, just the trail, the trees, and 2 nights under the stars. We arrived Friday afternoon and parked near a tiny general store at the trailhead. It looked like something out of a postcard, wooden porch, rocking chairs, and an old man sipping coffee and watching us like we were already in trouble. Before we started the hike, he stood up, walked over, and said, "You kids make sure you're off the ridge before sunset. Don't matter where you are. Just don't be on the trail after dark." We smiled and nodded, assuming he meant bears or maybe rough footing. He didn't elaborate, just stared until we walked off. That should have been our first clue. The first day went fine. The trail cut through thick woods, with occasional breaks revealing stunning views of rolling mountains and deep hollows below. It was quiet, no other hikers, just the wind in the leaves and our boots crunching soft earth. We made camp that night beside a shallow creek, cooked freeze-dried meals, and told stupid stories around a small fire. Leah brought up the old man's warning, kind of teasing it. "Off the ridge before sunset," she said in a gravelly voice, "or the mountain will eat ya." We all laughed, even me. The next day we slept in too late. The plan was to hike 10 more miles, cross a narrow ridge called Miller's Pass, and set up camp on the other side before dark. But we moved slower than expected. Marcus had a sore ankle from the previous hike, and we had to stop more than planned. By the time we reached the base of the ridge, the sun was dipping behind the peaks. "We should stop here," Devin said, pointing at a clearing off trail. "It's too exposed," I said, checking the map. "Once we get over the ridge, there's a dense tree line. Better cover." Leah agreed, and Marcus, limping and annoyed, just muttered, "Fine. Let's get it over with." We hit the ridge just as the sun was touching the horizon. The trees thinned out, and the wind picked up, stronger than before. Not just a breeze, but sharp gusts that came in bursts. The light faded fast. Shadows stretched longer than they should have. Every branch seemed to lean in just a little more than it had during the day. Then came the sound, like footsteps, but not ours. We all stopped at once. The trail was narrow, just wide enough for one person at a time, and the slope on either side dropped steep. But the sound, it was off to the right, in the woods, heavy, slow, like someone was following beside us, matching our pace. I looked at Leah. Her face had gone pale. "I heard it too," she whispered. Devin turned around, shining his flashlight toward the trees. "Nothing." Then Marcus said, "There's someone out there." The air changed. Not colder, quieter, like something was absorbing sound. We couldn't hear our own footsteps anymore, or the wind, or birds, just our breathing and the crunch of leaves behind us. "We need to move," I said. We picked up the pace, walking fast along the ridge. That's when Leah screamed. We turned and saw her standing frozen, pointing behind us. Something tall, human-shaped, just stepped back into the trees. I didn't see a face, just a shape. "Gray. Wrong. We need to run," she said. So we did. We ran down the other side of the ridge, tripping over roots, scraping against branches. The trail twisted sharply, but we didn't slow down. I could feel it behind us. Whatever it was, man-animal thing, it wasn't winded. It didn't sound like running. More like sliding, skimming through the underbrush with no effort. Devin shouted that he saw a clearing ahead, and we all burst into it, breathing heavy, hearts pounding. The moon had risen, casting a faint glow across the glade. And then we realized Marcus wasn't with us. He'd been right behind me. I was sure of it. "Marcus!" I yelled. The echo bounced off the trees. No answer. Leah pulled out her flashlight and aimed it back toward the ridge. The trail was empty. Then, from the darkness, we heard Marcus's voice. "I'm here." But it wasn't right. It was his voice, but stretched. Hollow, like someone trying to sound like him. We backed up. Then the voice came again. "I'm hurt," but it came from the wrong direction. The woods to the left, then to the right, then behind us again. It was like it was circling us, playing. Leah grabbed my hand and whispered, "That's not Marcus." Devin turned and bolted into the trees. We shouted for him, but he was gone within seconds. A second later, the woods went silent. Then something stepped out onto the trail behind us. It wasn't Marcus. I don't remember how we got back to the car. I just remember the sun rising, our legs numb, our packs long gone. Leah had dried blood on her hands from where she'd clawed at tree bark in the dark. We found the trailhead, stumbled into the parking lot, and collapsed beside the car like corpses. Devin was already there, sitting in the driver's seat, pale, eyes wide. He didn't speak the entire drive home. Marcus was never found. We filed a report. Rangers searched for days. Nothing. Not even his boot prints past the ridge. They said he probably slipped and fell off the trail. But I know better. Because last week, 3 months after it happened, I got a voicemail on my phone. Just breathing. Then Marcus's voice. Not panicked. Not scared. Just calm. "I'm hurt. Come get me." I threw the phone in the river. But I still hear that voice sometimes. In dreams. In static. Always the same words. Always after dark. And I never go hiking anymore. Not even during the day. Because whatever's in those woods, it doesn't forget the ones who heard it. And it wants you to come back. I was headed to Charleston from a small town in eastern Kentucky. Nothing dramatic, just a weekend trip to see my brother. I'd left late, around 7:30 p.m., figuring I'd rather drive through the quiet of the night than deal with morning traffic and the July heat. The route I picked was a lesser-known state highway that curved through the Appalachian foothills. Google Maps marked it as a quicker alternate. Big mistake. After an hour of winding roads, steep drops, and no signs of civilization, my '09 Corolla started making a low knocking sound in the engine. Then the lights dimmed. I glanced at my phone, no signal. No internet. Just a red battery icon blinking at me like a warning. I pulled over onto a patch of gravel shoulder barely wide enough for my car. The moment I turned off the ignition, everything went quiet. Like unnaturally quiet. No crickets. No birds. No wind. I cracked the door open, half expecting some truck to come barreling around the bend. Nothing. Just the oppressive stillness and the thick, wet smell of pine. I popped the hood and stared at the engine, pretending I knew what I was looking for. I didn't, but I needed to do something. After a few minutes of poking around and finding absolutely nothing useful, I shut the hood and leaned against the car, trying not to panic. That's when I heard it. Crunch. Leaves. About 30 feet into the tree line, something stepped on dry leaves. I spun around fast, expecting a deer, but there was nothing there. I stared into the trees for a long moment. That's when I noticed the shape. It wasn't moving, just standing behind a thick trunk, barely visible. Human height, dark clothes. It could have been a hiker, sure. But the stillness of it, I don't know. Something felt off. I said, "Hey, you alright out there?" No response. I took a step closer to the woods, trying to convince myself I was being ridiculous. That's when the figure shifted, fast. It moved behind another tree, just out of view, like it didn't want me to see it clearly. I backed away slowly, heart pounding. When I got back to the car, I locked the doors and turned the key, praying the engine would catch. It didn't. Not even a click. My phone was still dead. The sky was dimming fast, the sun already dipped behind the ridge. I was running out of daylight and options. I grabbed the flashlight from my glove compartment and sat there for maybe 15 more minutes. Nothing moved. No sounds. Not even that figure again. I told myself I imagined it, that I was just tired and stressed and overthinking everything. I decided to walk. According to the last GPS ping, there was a gas station 5 or 6 miles back the way I came. Not ideal, but better than sitting here overnight. I took the flashlight, locked the car behind me, and started walking along the gravel shoulder. It was almost pitch dark after 20 minutes. The road curved endlessly, no signs, no streetlights, and the only sound was my own breathing. I kept the flashlight pointed ahead, but something told me not to look behind me. Eventually I gave in. I turned the light over my shoulder. There was someone walking maybe 50 feet behind me. I froze. The figure was tall, maybe 6 feet, wearing a hoodie. No light, no phone, nothing to suggest they were just another stranded driver. And they weren't calling out to me or asking for help. They were just following. I whispered, "Hello," again. No answer. They kept walking. I picked up my pace, heart hammering. I didn't run, not yet. I didn't want to give them a reason to chase. After a few minutes, I dared another look. They were closer, 15 feet behind me. That's when I ran. I sprinted down the pitch-black road, lungs burning, flashlight bobbing wildly. The footsteps behind me sped up too. No more silence. Whoever was following me wasn't hiding it anymore. I heard the crunch of boots, the snap of twigs, and then, closer than I expected, ragged breathing. There was no time to think. I darted off the road into the woods, flashlight barely cutting through the thick brush. Branches whipped my face and arms. I nearly lost a shoe in the mud. I could still hear them behind me, closer, louder. They weren't yelling. They weren't saying anything, just breathing heavy and running. That was the worst part. The silence. Whoever they were, they didn't want to scare me. They wanted to catch me. I kept moving downhill, hoping to find a creek or anything I could follow. That's when I tripped. My flashlight flew from my hand and cracked against a rock. It went dark instantly. I lay there for a second, wind knocked out of me, ears straining. Silence again, but now I couldn't see them. And then, a voice, whispered, close enough to feel. "Don't run." I scrambled backward, clawing at the ground, but saw nothing. Just trees. I don't know how long I lay there, holding my breath, but eventually I heard retreating steps. Whoever they were, they backed off, but I didn't move. Not for a long time. I think I passed out. When I opened my eyes, it was morning. Gray light filtered through the trees. My head hurt. My arm was scraped, and my phone was still useless. But I was alive. I stood up and limped back toward the road, following my own boot prints through the mud. It took over an hour, but I finally found the shoulder where I'd parked. My car was gone. Gone. No broken glass. No tire tracks. Just empty gravel and the faint scent of exhaust. I stood there in total disbelief, trying to make sense of it. There was no tow truck. No note. Nothing. I walked another 2 miles before I flagged down a passing delivery van. The guy was kind enough to let me use his radio to call the state police. A trooper met me at a gas station an hour later. He was polite but skeptical. Said there hadn't been any reports of a missing car in that area, and the tow companies hadn't picked anything up either. When I insisted they check the GPS history, they said they would, but later. Before leaving, he gave me a strange look and said, "You're not the first person to go missing along that road, but usually we don't see him again." He didn't say it like a joke. I stayed at a motel that night, paid in cash. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure walking silently behind me. The next morning, I checked my email on a borrowed phone. There was one new message. No subject line. No sender listed. Just one sentence. "You shouldn't have run." I deleted it without thinking. I never filed the insurance claim. Never bought another car. I take buses now, crowded ones, noisy ones, the kind where someone would notice if you disappeared. And I never take the back roads anymore. Because out there, in the quiet folds of the Appalachian nowhere, you're never really alone. Even when you think you are.